maybe you're like me and Sammy, and you think you are as independent as the United States of America. That could be a little bit problematic.
Oh, wake up, rethink the status quo. When you get your money right, then you're the one who runs your life. Come build a wealthy spirit with Sammy and Michelle.
Happy Independence Day to the best country in the world. It's hard not to think that you live in the best country in the world when your parents worked so hard to come to this country and they built a brighter future for you, aka me and Michelle.
That is the United States of America. And I agree, Sammy. Happy Independence Day. If you are listening to this episode when it comes out, July 4th, Independence Day in the United States is right around the corner. And Sammy and I wanted to talk about, is independence all it's cut out to be?
You know, I took a values quiz, and both independence and freedom were in my top 5.
Wow, you were born in the right country then. Or that country influenced you.
One of the two. What I have had to learn is the value of dependency. It almost feels wrong to say.
Sammy's values quiz is like independence, freedom, patriotism, love of cheeseburgers. Here's the thing about us. We grew up hearing the message from our mother, never depend on anybody. Don't depend on a man. Always take care of yourself. Always be able to pay your own bills. Be independent. And like you, Sammy, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that.
Then in adulthood, I found out about financial independence. You could be even more independent than you already were. You could even be independent from a job.
You could be independent from the man, the corporate man.
And now I'm starting to realize that though independence is great in so many ways, when it comes to those intimate relationships in your life, dependency is not only normal, but it can be healthy and it can unlock security and the courage we need to take risks in our lives.
But first, I'm so happy we're talking about having great relationships because our partner today, AirHelp, is somebody you can depend on. Here's the thing. Something you can't really depend on is your flight getting somewhere on time. That, unfortunately, I like to be a positive person, and yet for some reason every time I fly, I feel like I have to book an extra day just because I'm like, well, what if I get bummed? What if the whole thing gets canceled? What if it's 5 hours later and I'm still at the airport? I hope those things don't happen, but if they do, I have somebody like AirHelp who I can give them the information for my travels. I can let them know what inconveniences I went through, and they will go talk to the airlines and see if there's anything under air passenger rights or just compensation the airline might be willing to give you. So check out our partner, AirHelp, if you're planning on flying. Hopefully you don't need it, but you might. Sammy, I'm really excited to talk about the dependency paradox. When we read Attached a few years ago, this really, really stuck with me because of exactly what we were talking about. I thought independence, you have to be independent. You find somebody who's independent, you'll be two independent people together. And that's just not the case. Amir Levine and Rachel Heller in Attached talk about the dependency paradox. And they say, quote, "The more effectively dependent people are on one another, the more independent and more daring they can become." Insert mind-blown emoji.
You know, Michelle, I had the same reaction, and I remembered this for the same reason, because I viscerally cringed when I heard that, because it went against everything I was raised on. This idea that we need other people, it just felt so wrong. I'm fine with other people needing me, but me needing them, I didn't want it. And I don't want too much of other people needing me either.
And yet, I think this is so important for people who are on either side of the scale. Maybe you're somebody who is comfortable being dependent on other people, or you ask to have your needs met in relationships. And I think our society, especially American society, can make you feel bad for it. Or maybe you're like me and Sammy, and you think you are as independent as the United States of America. That could be a little bit problematic, because trying to do everything by yourself, thinking you don't need to depend on anybody, that you can't ask for help, that you can't ask for reassurance is, I realize, only going to hold me back in my life.
So the first step on this dependency journey is identifying where you're at. Are you somebody who leans on the dependent side? You feel comfortable asking other people for help? Maybe sometimes you feel needy asking other people for help. Maybe you're on that side of the spectrum. On the other hand, maybe you're like me and Michelle. You don't want to ask for help. You want to be self-sufficient. You feel really negative about being overly attached to anybody. You might be leaning on the independent side of the spectrum.
Sammy, I can quickly identify myself as the independent side because I remember how much it pained me to think about moving back home with my parents. I did not appreciate that I had two people I could go and live with, especially after I lost my job, after COVID. It wasn't until I saw other people, friends doing it, that I let myself be okay with it. But for me, it was so difficult to quote unquote swallow that pill and be dependent on my parents. But actually, it wasn't so bad. And it allowed me to build wealth and security and go take on more risks in my life.
For me, Michelle, I started to butt up against independence when I began entering romantic relationships. In romantic relationships, naturally you begin to depend on another person.
Ideally, even.
Ideally. And for me, even now, it is hard for me not to view that behavior as negative, maybe even a little bit pathetic, if I'm being honest. And I'm learning to undo that.
It's true, Sammy. And I think once again, it comes back to our programming. Be independent. Even, maybe seeing other people be dependent on their partners and thinking when you're young, oh, okay, that person is stuck in a situation. They can't move forward. Versus now, when I've seen a lot of healthy relationships that my friends are in, I see how that dependency, they can shift. One person can support somebody when they lose a job or when they want to explore something cool. And then maybe a couple of years later, that shifts. Somebody else is the breadwinner and somebody else is helping take care of different responsibilities. And so I think being able to identify where you are also helps you identify what you need to do if you want to create more of that secure base in your own relationships.
So now, ways we can be better about allowing ourselves to be dependent in our intimate relationships. Number one is be vulnerable. Vulnerability is one of the most uncomfortable things.
At least for me.
But the more vulnerable we can be, the better our relationships will be.
I realized this, Sammy, when we moved to Charleston. I had been, to be honest, too dependent maybe on other people in my life. I moved in with my parents. I moved with you to Blythe. And when we were in the small town, we were truly very dependent on each other. We were going through some crazy situations. I didn't always feel that comfortable in town. A lot of times we would drive 2 hours to go to the grocery store together. And I was living with you. You were helping cover my living expenses since I was living in Blythe. And so there was just a lot of us, I think, moving from maybe healthy dependency to more of an enmeshment. And that was okay then. But then when I moved to Charleston and we both had different goals, I started to get really frustrated because you would suggest doing things like going to work out, or you wanted to hang meetups and hang out with people. And my goals were actually more focused on my work and developing my writing. And I would just say yes to things that you said because I was like, oh, we always do things together. And then I got frustrated and I would get upset and I would nitpick and criticize you and we would get in huge fights.
And to be clear, the nitpicking and criticizing was not usually specifically about me asking Michelle to come hang out with me.
Yes, exactly. It would be something like maybe you left the dishes in the dishwasher or something like that. I had to admit to myself when I saw that I was getting upset, when we were fighting so often, I had to realize that I was moving along with what you want to do and I wasn't really putting myself first. And I had to express that to you, which can be kind of embarrassing. We're sisters. And I came up with a term for it even. I called it conscious decoupling, like Gwyneth Paltrow in her divorce. And I think it helped a lot to just sit and talk with you and recognize that it was difficult for me to enforce my own boundaries, especially around my time. And you were actually very open to it. You're like, yeah, I won't invite you to everything. I'll just know if you want to come, you can say you want to come.
What I had found was that You have a tendency to actually agree to things that you may not want to agree to. And the way that we could form a relationship together is by me just not asking you to join. And you actually prefer this.
Exactly. And I don't want to face that you have a better plan in place and I'm just following along. But doing so and being vulnerable with you allowed us to work through problems, create a secure base, and allowed me actually to really lean into a lot of cool things I was able to work on, projects I was able to take on because I had that space.
The number 2 way we can be better about being dependent in a healthy way is by asking for help.
How do you feel about that, Sam?
Bad. This is so hard for me. I remember when I started working in family medicine, I just would work all the time, work all the shifts, see as many people as possible because I thought that's what I'm supposed to do. I'd take all the walk-ins. And of course, I got overwhelmed. I'm new to family medicine. There was a lot I had to learn. There's a lot of processes I had to refine. And I was just constantly having tons of work to do. And then later I saw that when other people would start new, they would start working and then they would notice that they had a workload that was over their capacity. And a lot of people would just ask to have that cut down. And I thought that was so respectable because having then worked there for years, I'm like, yeah, it's too much work for a new person. You need time to learn so that you don't make mistakes, so that you're not overburdened. And they were actually very correct in just asking for a less intense load. And I realized that I didn't feel comfortable doing that because I felt like I needed to be independent. I need to prove my worth. I didn't want to make my workplace have to bend over backwards for me.
Work is such a great example, Sammy. And I think a lot of people come from similar cultures like ours, which mistakenly said, go to work, put your head down, do good work, do whatever they say, don't question anything. You don't want to get fired. You don't want to lose your job. You don't want to be a burden to your boss. You don't want to ask for a promotion. You don't want to ask how to get a promotion. All of that prevents you from moving forward. However, if you can ask for help when you need it, you can actually accomplish the things you want to do. You can be a great worker. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And a lot of times people want to help you, or you'll find the people that want to help you. Asking for help, especially when you recognize you're struggling in certain areas, your workload is too much, you've taken on a responsibility that you can no longer handle, those are great opportunities to look at your community, not just a partner. Look at your community and see, are there people out here who I can depend on?
Takeaways.
Takeaways for this episode. Being dependent is not a bad thing. Specifically, being dependent in our most intimate, most time-consuming relationships, whether that's with the people around us or at work, a little bit of dependency, a little bit of give and take is completely okay. It's healthy, it's normal, and it actually provides a base for better results and more success.
I love the chapter title and attached for this, Dependency is not a bad word. It's so true. Ever since I heard that, I really started to reconsider my relationships with people and how I did view relationships as I need to be independent and they need to be independent. And reviewing this also helped me realize, okay, there's nothing bad with receiving. There's nothing bad with asking people for help. There's nothing bad about having a secure base. And actually, not only is it not bad, you can actually do better. You, your partner, your community can do better because you can try things, you can take risks from a place of security instead of a place of fear, scarcity, or just depending on yourself, a single point of failure.
Ways to do that? Number 1, be vulnerable. What are you not admitting to yourself or to other people that could help them help serve you better? Number 2, ask for help. Once you realize what you need, directly ask for assistance because people do not know how to help you unless you tell them.
I love this quote, Amy. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Life is long and we need other people. Life is more joyous if we have other people. So there's nothing wrong with having an interdependent community. Not unlike actually the United States of America, Sammy. We are not independent. We rely on other countries. We have relationships with other countries. We rely on the people. And I think that is such a beautiful thing.
Community time!
Before we say goodbye,
It's our community time.
speaking of beautiful things, Michelle and I realized in this discussion that we have a beautifully dependent relationship.
Yeah, especially since a year ago, which is crazy to think about, we started thinking about moving from our small town. And that actually, I think, is a beautiful example of a healthy dependency on one another.
We both use our skills to create a list of all the tasks that we needed to do before we move. Getting a U-Haul, moving our cars, having a yard sale, finding an apartment. We created a list of all the tasks that need to be done, and we would each choose tasks that we would do based on our skill set or our time availability, and we would mark on the document when we got it done. And this really allowed us to effectively plan and get things done more quickly. Some of those things had to be done together, like the yard sale. And for those things, we knew we'd work together on that.
And this is one of those things in a sentence. Sounds so smooth. But moving, anyone who has had to move, whether it's across the country like we were doing or even just small moves, it is the most uncertain and unreliable activity. There were a lot of people we had to depend on. The people who were moving our car, the people who were moving our box, the people who were helping us move our things. In a city where, quite frankly, most people were coming from far distances, 2 hours away. Some people were just our neighbors being kind. It was very stressful to have to depend on so many people. And yet, despite the anxiety, everybody was great. Everyone was reliable. They showed up on time. They helped out. In fact, we got more help than we needed. We had to turn people away. And it really made me appreciate how, a small town is such a great example of how people are so willing to help one another and help each other succeed.
For example, we needed someone to help actually load up our moving box, and the guy who cuts our grass was willing to do it. He brought over a team of people, and they did it so quickly. I mean, it was better than the professional movers we hired when we got to Charleston.
No shade to them. They were great too. In their defense, they had to walk up a whole flight of stairs.
3 flights of stairs.
But 100%, they were great. The real thing is these people were better than us.
Much better. Yes, we could pretend we would try to load that, but we're weak.
We're weak. We're short. The box is very tall. We had to make adjustments by ourselves.
Nothing like a small town to make you appreciate that dependency is not only not a negative, but it's a positive thing that leads to better outcomes in the long run.
Especially when that small town is in the middle of nowhere. Let us know. Does this strike a chord with you? Are you somebody who's you're very good at receiving things? You're very good at depending on other people? Or are you somebody like us who sort of have this narrative, you have to be independent, maybe to your detriment? buildawhealthyspirit.com. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
And most importantly, be sure to join us next time as we put down the rulebook and rethink the status quo.